Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Lewis Talks Crypto. So today we're going to talk about cryptocurrencies and what are they? So this is your intro to cryptocurrencies. So every good discussion about crypto and cryptocurrencies typically starts in my mind with a question about what is money? Because if you don't understand what money is, it's really hard to wrap your head around what crypto is, because crypto is a type of money. And a lot of people, including myself, take money for granted. You know, we use it every day. We don't really know like what is it? Is it these paper bills? Is it gold? So if you look back at the history of money, and this is not going to be a lecture about like what the history of money is, but if you look back at the history of money and you get really into it, at the end of the day, all money is an IOU. So imagine you meet up with a friend, and your friend has some coffee, and you're like, I want to buy some coffee. So your friend gives you the coffee, and you're like, hey man, I owe you for the coffee. You've just purchased a pound of coffee, so you write a little note saying, I owe you for the coffee. And next time you see your friend, you might be like, hey, I got some bananas. And your friend's like, yo, how about I give you this note that you left me for the coffee in exchange for the bananas? And that's fine as long as everyone's like honest about writing notes, and everybody agrees that a bunch of bananas and a pound of coffee is worth the same thing. So money is a way of keeping track of all of these IOUs that are flying around. So really, in the day, money just requires an information system, a way to keep track of information. And that could be banknotes, that could be a ledger of entries just written in a book somewhere like an accountant would keep. Gold is used because gold is basically just transferring information. We've assigned a certain amount of value to gold, and now when I give gold to somebody, they can receive the value that's stored in that gold that we've all collectively agreed is stored in that gold. So it's a little bit of an esoteric concept, but really at the end of the day, there's 4 properties that I've just thought of off the top of my head. 4 properties that make money valuable. So number 1 is that it's durable. It has to last a long time. So, apples don't necessarily make good money because after the end of the season they're probably rotten, and so they're not very good at storing value. But gold's good because gold lasts a long time. You can put it in a safe, and in 100 years it'll still be there. Your store of value is good, so it's got to be durable. It's also got to be durable enough that it can be passed around. So apples and bananas might not make good money because if you pass apples and bananas around enough, they start to get bruised. Whereas gold, you can drop it, you can step on it, you can kind of abuse it, and it's still good. Number 2, money has to be fungible. Now, some of you may have heard the word fungible in the context of non-fungible tokens. We're going to get into that in another episode, but for now, fungibility is a measure of how interchangeable 2 units of the same thing are. So like one gold coin, another gold coin, or $1 bill and another dollar bill are perfectly fungible. You don't really care whether you have gold coin A or dollar bill A versus gold coin B or dollar coin B. Whereas 2 cars, they might be exactly the same make, model, everything's identical about them, same kilometers, but these 2 cars are not perfectly fungible because each one has its own unique history that has an impact on its value. Maybe one was driven entirely in the city and the other one was driven entirely on the highway. The one that was driven on the highway is going to be more valuable. So those 2 cars are not fungible. They're not exchangeable perfectly. 2 houses are even less fungible. 2 pieces of artwork are like completely not fungible at all. And that's why NFTs are called non-fungible tokens. We'll get into that later. So durability, fungibility, and then it's got to be transferable. Money that can't be easily transferred from one location or one person to another isn't very useful. So gold coins are nice because you can take them and carry them around with you. But you know, like houses don't make good money because you can't move them around. Even if houses were fungible, you couldn't take them with you and like transfer them across, you know, to another country. You couldn't take them down the street to the grocery store. Money has to be verifiable. It has to be easy to authenticate. So if I meet some guy on the street and I want to buy his stuff, the money that I pull out of my pocket, he has to know very quickly that it's authentic money and not something that's just like, that I just made up on the fly, right? It can't be something that I've just like written down a piece of paper and like, you know, forged. So that's why modern banknotes are really important to have all these anti-forgery qualities in them. And then I just thought of a fifth one actually, and that is that money has to be divisible. So it has to be easy to break down into smaller and smaller pieces. Again, gold is good for this because you got your gold coin. In worst case scenario, you can kind of clip it in half and break it into pieces. You know, there's lots of different types of money that you can break up, like dollars are broken into cents. So if you want to buy smaller and smaller increments. So there's all these reasons that things like gold and silver have become money over the years, whereas houses and cars have become these goods that we buy with money. So with your background now set up about what is money and what makes money valuable, let's talk about crypto. So crypto is an information system that uses blockchains. What's a blockchain? Well, imagine you're at a party and you were so excited to go to the party you forgot to bring some beer. So you go to your friend and you say, hey, do you have some extra beer? And your friend's like, sure, yeah, no problem. I'll sell you this 6-pack for $10. And you're like, you know what? I don't have any money. We're gonna make up some money on the fly here. And it's kind of going to be like a blockchain. So you say, hey, no problem. I'm going to make sure that everybody in this room knows that I'm going to pay you back later. So you say to everybody, hey, party, I'm taking the 6-pack of beer. I owe this guy $10. Don't let me forget. So now, rather than having an agreement between two people, you've made an agreement with the entire party. Everybody in that party knows that you accepted the beer, and everybody in the party knows that you're going to pay $10 for it. Now there's a unwritten but spoken and commonly known contract between you and your friend that you owe that person $10. Now you can imagine that's kind of the same as you writing an IOU and having everybody in the party sign the IOU. So that gives that IOU value because now your friend could take that signed IOU or that declaration of intent to pay $10 and go to somebody else and be like, hey, I want to buy a 6-pack of beer from you. Here's the $10 that Lewis owes me. So now when that person who wasn't my friend comes back to me with that piece of paper saying, hey, you know, you owe this guy $10, but he gave it to me. So now I pay that person $10. And again, it doesn't have to be written on a piece of paper. If when my friend passes my debt over to somebody else, they might say, hey everybody, I'm giving the $10 that Lewis owes me to Jim. Now Jim is owed $10 by Lewis. And it's this idea of declaration to the entire room, or in the case of a blockchain, the entire blockchain. It's the declaration of intent to pay that makes up a blockchain. So when I do a cryptocurrency transaction, if I'm sending money, Bitcoin say, to my friend in exchange for the beer that he's given me, basically I'm saying to the blockchain, I'm writing a message to the entire blockchain saying that I owe Jim, $10 worth of Bitcoin. And what's key about this is that the blockchain is secured with cryptography. Basically, it's a super complicated way of ensuring the identity and the authenticity of where the information is coming from and where it's going. So I go to a party and I walk in there and I'm like, hey everybody, Jim's paying Sally $10. And Jim's like, no, I'm not. I didn't have any transaction with Sally. And then everybody in the room has to be like, yeah, Lewis, you're not Jim. Like, you don't have the authority to spend Jim's money. And whereas if I go to the party and I say, hey, I'm Lewis, I'm giving Sally $10, everyone's like, yeah, you're Lewis, and you're giving Sally $10. And so everybody in that room that validates that transaction by authenticating my identity is those are the miners on the blockchain. So how do the miners on the blockchain in Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies know who I am? Because they don't meet me. That's where the idea of a private key comes in. So if you've got a transaction and you take your private key, which is known only to you, you take the transaction details and the private key and you run that through a special algorithm together, and then at the end of that you get a signature, kind of like signing a check. That signature goes out with the transaction. Your private key doesn't go with the transaction. The signature goes out with the transaction. And the signature and the transaction together get run backwards through a complicated system that the miners run. And the miners basically find an answer that's not your private key. They find an answer to that combination of the signature and the transaction details to say, yes, this signature matches this transaction, and it ties back to the private key that is associated with Lewis's Bitcoin wallet. Therefore, this is a transaction from Lewis's Bitcoin wallet and nobody else's. And so the private key tied up with the transaction tells the miners on the blockchain who is sending the transaction, and the public key of the receiving wallet is telling the miners who the transaction is being sent to. And once that information is all recorded on the blockchain, it's there forever. Now that you've been thoroughly confused about blockchain and crypto, why is it valuable? Well, let's go back to what makes money valuable. There's those 5 things that I talked about at the beginning: durability, fungibility, transferability, verifiability, and divisibility. So crypto is durable because it's stored in a decentralized system. Every computer in the world that's on the Bitcoin network running a node stores a copy of the blockchain. So you'd have to take down literally every single computer in that network, at least half of them. You'd have to compromise in order to wipe out that information. It's fungible because one Bitcoin can be transferred in exchange for another Bitcoin. One Ethereum can be exchanged equally for another Ethereum. Nobody really cares whether you've got Bitcoin A or Bitcoin B. They're perfectly fungible between one another. Transferable, they're super easy to transfer. I can send Bitcoin around the world in a matter of seconds, maybe minutes if the network's a little slow. Other cryptocurrencies work even faster, and it's very, very cheap to do so. I can carry it with me. I can leave it behind securely because it's all just passwords. It's verifiable because there's no worry about forgery. If I give you a gold coin, you might be like, well, is this a real gold coin or is this a piece of lead that's coated with gold? You know, you can bite into it and see the marks, but lead's pretty soft too. Like, you know, if you go to a gold dealer, they'll take 15 minutes, half an hour verifying all of your gold pieces. They don't just take them at face value because they can't tell whether that gold's real or not. Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these other cryptocurrencies are super easy to verify. And that's one of the really awesome things about crypto. And lastly, they're divisible. I can send you a whole Bitcoin, I can send you a half a Bitcoin, I can send you all the way down to 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And the same with Ethereum. I can send you fractions of Bitcoin or Ethereum. I can send you fractions of just about every cryptocurrency that's ever been invented. So just to recap it all, cryptocurrency is money because it's durable, fungible, transferable, verifiable, and divisible. It runs on a blockchain, which is a declaration of intent to transfer a debt owed for goods and services, or potentially for other money, or some sort of commodities. Like I always say, this stuff's the future, and it ain't going away.